Sean, what's up, man? Great to see you. It looks like you got the Order of Man hat on, the same one I do, in fact. I think we've got like five or six colors of this hat now.
Yeah, I think I have all five or six.
We'll have to come out with some new ones so I can sell you some more stuff.
That's right, man.
I could
That's my
probably just
thing is hats. It drives my wife crazy.
I could probably just send you a few. It's the least I can do. Well, good, man. Well, you're filling in for Kip today. I don't know where he is. He just said he needs somebody to fill in. I said, all right, good. I got the guy. So you've had plenty under your belt with me and him. So we'll get after our questions today.
Awesome. Questions are
Before
coming from what's
I was
that?
just going to say, before we get started, I want to let the guys know that the Iron Council is officially open. So if you've considered joining or on the fence or don't even know what it is, head to orderoman.com/Iron Council. You can learn more and see what it's all about. And yeah, should be really good. So check it out.
All righty. Questions are coming from the Facebook group today. And we got a few. Hopefully some more will come in as we go, if we even
Awesome.
get there. But the first one's from Michael Van Volkenberg.
Okay.
He says, is there a balance between sharing your goals to be held accountable and telling everyone your business? Do you think a man should stay silent and quote unquote let them see the results?
Yeah, I don't know about the balance necessarily. We can talk about that, but I would say that he said sharing with everybody. You don't need to share with everybody because what is the point of that? In my mind, if you're going to share a goal or an objective, even with even with your spouse, I think it is purely for some level of accountability. Otherwise, why are you sharing? Like I read an article that said, and I don't know if this is just pseudoscience, but it said basically that when people share what they're going to do, they they get some accolades and they automatically experience the benefit of actually doing the thing. So let me give you an example. If you said, for example, on Facebook, "Hey guys, I'm so excited. I've decided to run a marathon." Look in the comments. The comments, there's going to be a ton of cheers and thumbs up, and the comments are like, "That's awesome! You're amazing! Way to go! Congrats! That's going to be so cool." It's like, well, hold on a second. You actually haven't even done anything yet. You haven't even started training yet. You just punched away at your thumbs and said that you're going to do a thing. Well,
Yeah, way to think about it.
right. Good. Congratulations. You thought about doing something, as we all have. So, I mean, it's fine, share that, but only if there's a desired outcome in sharing it. And that would be that somebody's going to hold you accountable, or maybe you share it with somebody who's qualified in whatever you're doing, and they could give you some guidance and direction and input on what it is that you want to accomplish. So, if we go back to that marathon example, I think it would be worthwhile to share that with a circle of friends who have run marathons before. Because then what they're going to do is they're going to say, "Oh man, that's awesome. Here's a couple of training resources I have," or make sure you hydrate properly, or hey, here's a great resource on how to get the best stride, or whatever it is. And then you're going to get the accountability and you're also going to get the resources. So don't just share it with everybody willy nilly. There's no point in doing that, other than just the pats on the back, which feels good but doesn't do anything. And be selective with who you share it with, is what I would say.
I would agree with that, but also add that there's also power in marketing. And so the most powerful marketing really is word of mouth. And, as you said, you need to have your radar up. So you don't necessarily need to share it with every single person you come across, but you need to find value in conversations and helping to fill needs. So you have maybe it's a product or a service that you offer, and that radar should always be up. So you should always be ready to talk about it. And when the topic comes up, when you find a need, or when you're talking to somebody who maybe they know of somebody who has a need, or maybe they're a center of influence and you figure that out, that you're ready to share with them, but you don't just lay it on every single person you come across. So there's some tact involved in how you share. And the better you get at that really involves your listening instead of you just sharing. So the more you listen, the more you pay attention, the more you stay involved in conversation with people and listen to them as you're engaging, you'll find more opportunity to share, but it's going to be appropriate and it's going to be more useful and valuable to you because you're not going to be catching people off guard. You're not going to be that guy who makes people feel uncomfortable. It's like, oh no, here comes Larry. He's going to be talking about his thing again or whatever it is. And honestly, I know guys who do that and they're still very successful doing that. But I see guys who are even more successful that still are able to share with everyone they know, but they do it tactfully. And
Right.
so I think pay attention to how you're sharing and when, and get more masterful at that. And that'll highly benefit you. But definitely let them stay silent and let them see the results. I don't think that serves anybody, honestly. You definitely don't take it to that extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I like it. All right. What's next?
Next one is Derek Marsh. He says, I've followed Order of Man for a little less than a year now, and I've loved how outspoken and forward you are about men holding ourselves accountable for being protectors, providers, and presiders. As a man of faith and seeing the things going on in the world, do you see a greater demand for Christians to be emboldened to stand for Christian values? And do you think Order of Man has brought so many men together for you to be able to spread these values as a believer?
Yes and yes. I mean, what are, I think we need to ask, what are Christian values? You know, because there could be some misinterpretation about that. But honesty, integrity, hard work, when you mess things up, make them right, traditional family values, you know, virtuous living, all the things that I screw up on all the time. And so, should we talk about those more? Yeah, of course. Of course we should. And I feel like there's a hidden question in here. Because it's almost, you're asking rhetorical questions, and I'm not trying to beat the question up, but there's a different question you're asking. This is not the real question you're asking. You might not even be asking a question. You might be saying, and maybe I'm just interpreting it through my lens, is you should talk more about Christianity. That when I hear this question, that's what comes to mind. You should talk more about it. And I will when I feel it's necessary and important. In fact, I've talked about it a lot more. And I'm trying to rebuild the spiritual component of my life. It's very important to me, and I've let that go over the past couple of years. So you're going to hear me talk more about it. But then I would encourage you to talk about it. Like, don't worry too much about what I'm doing. Like, you talk about it, and you can talk about it here. You can talk about it in the Facebook group. You can talk about it in our brotherhood, the Iron Council. But if you feel like there's a need for Christian values and talking more about it, then by all means, do that. We should be able to have those conversations. And we have a faith channel in the Iron Council where guys from all different faiths are talking about their faith, their beliefs, their value system. And so, yeah, I would highly encourage you to do what's on your heart and do what's on your mind. But yeah, absolutely, Christian values are crucial. And by the way, if you were to extrapolate the supernatural part of Christianity, I think 99.9% of us would agree that that's all good living. Like, so that's why I kind of wonder if it's a rhetorical question and you're instead saying you should just talk about it more. I don't know. Do you interpret it that way, or do you interpret it differently?
I felt that way with the question. I felt like you did. So that's funny that you said that because I felt the same. I feel like when there's some guys, and I'm not saying that's him. I'm not picking on Derek here, but there's some guys that ask those questions to kind of validate their um maybe Christianity, but just to validate the fact that they um aren't afraid to take on the name of Jesus Christ. Right. I mean, that's one of the things that we do when we get baptized. But simultaneously, like you said, I feel like those values supersede just Christianity. And one of the thoughts I had literally as I was reading the question is that, like, just because you're Christian and we have those values doesn't mean that you have to be Christian to agree. And so I think that's where the line is that a lot of times there's a difference between taking on the name of Jesus Christ and pushing Christianity down people's throats. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the first question, right? And when do you share? Do you just share to everybody? How often? And I think of, as you were talking, it made me think of Mustafa and the Iron Council,
I was
right?
thinking
You
the
know,
same.
oh, really? That's
Mm-hmm.
Mustafa brings so much value to the entire IC, and he's Muslim, but he has the same values. So he's not Christian, but the core of his values are the same. And so it's understanding that if we were just a Christian movement, then you'd be excluding a valuable member of the IC and his circle of influence, and not just a member of the IC. I mean, just the value that he brings to us to grow as men. And so I think you're right with the values are there. And the fact that we happen to be Christian is important. But I think the important part also of Christianity, we also have to be careful because a lot of questions like this are also kind of like they almost are looking for you to be perfect in those values. And so I think if we're going to talk about Christian values, the things we can't forget are repentance, accountability, for me, and that we have an enemy. And so I thought a lot about that this morning. I was out building a deck next to our pond, finishing it up, and one of my boys got up, Brody got up with me at 6 a.m. and helped me finish out. And I was down there, I was like, this is such a cool thing to do and to be involved. Our whole family helped build this thing while Jamie's out of town. We're surprising her with it. When she comes back, it'll be done.
That's cool.
But it was, I thought about that and our ability to spend the time. And that throughout that, I had a lot of lessons for myself as a father, like being patient, not being short with them, catching myself, wanting to be a better father. And it made me think, like, even in something like that I did together, made it a family activity, there were seeds there were things happening that could have destroyed that as a positive experience and made it a negative. And for me, my belief is that that's the enemy working on trying to divide our family. And so that can happen in anything. And my awareness of that helps me to constantly be able to fight it. So, if we're talking Christian values, I think that's I think we look at just the commandments, and then when we don't hold to those commandments, then we kind of, I guess, judge people for it, or can judge people for it, when, we also need to understand repentance and forgiveness and the accountability that comes with that, and grace, and, be mindful of those things, and be good examples of all of it. And so, like you said, I almost feel like these questions are kind of traps sometimes. But I think as Christians, it's important that we don't make it that, and that we make it all inclusive at the same time. And when I say all inclusive, I'm not talking in a woke sense. I'm just saying it, I hope I articulated it well, but
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, you're spot on with everything you said. And the only thing I would add to that is sometimes I feel like we look to other people or movements, organizations, businesses, and we think because we have some sort of an affinity or connection with them, because we believe in what they're doing, like people believe in what we do here with Order of Man, that, well, we should just do it this way. And I don't actually mind suggestions. I think the suggestions that people make here are great and they're valuable. But also, let's not forget that we have an opportunity as individuals to share a message, to spread a message. So if there's something that you feel like needs to be shared, then you share it. Like, don't always look for, and again, I don't think this is what he's doing here necessarily, but don't always be so quick to hope that other people will do what you think they should do or what you want them to do, and do it yourself. Like, you share that message, you talk about that, you bring that up, you start a movement, you start an organization, you start a men's thing at church. These are all things that you can do and are fully within your control. And we've been advocating for that for almost 8 years now. So let's not forget that we have a tremendous opportunity and power ourselves as individuals to do things within our families and communities and in the areas in which we operate.
Yeah. And you're right though. It is, yes. Like it's definitely needed.
Sure,
Those
of course.
values are slipping or affecting. I mean, if you just look to statistically at crime rates and divorces and, you know, the things that strengthen our really the foundation of our country, that's slipping away because of
Yeah.
a lack of those values.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Cool. What's next?
Next is Joel Stoughton. Says, I've spent the last 2 years working full-time overnight while going to nursing school during the day. My current job as a mental health tech is exhausting and recently have become a new dad, which has its own level of exhaustion. And he said in parentheses, super dad to be a dad though. Super happy to be a dad though. I continue to grind to provide for my family, but how can I combat burnout?
I
So
I think the
working
first
full-time
thing,
overnight.
yeah. Well, look, there's seasons to life, right? And I think the first thing you need to recognize is that this is not a permanent thing. That you're going to school, you've got a new kid, you're working overnight, and that's really challenging. And I wish I could tell you if you do this A, B, and C that you won't be burned out on all the stuff. The fact of the matter is that something's going to have to give, and it will at some point, right? School semesters will be wrapping up, your child will get older, which makes it easier. There's not as much intensive care needed for a child as they get older. That's not to say things aren't replaced, because now, I was thinking about it. My wife is out of town this past weekend, and I went. Let's see, Wednesday was dance class in a town that was 45 minutes away. Thursday, I had one son who had practice and football practice, and another son who had a game. Friday, we had a game for my oldest son. Saturday, we had a game for my second son. Sunday, yesterday, just church and things around here. Oh, and then they had lifting that afternoon, my two oldest boys. So it's like, it never completely goes away. It changes, but you also get more capable of dealing with it. But also know that it's just seasons. And so, yeah, you're going to have to put the nose to the grindstone for a little bit and just deal with it. Now, what can you do? You can manage your time more effectively. You can make sure that you're communicating effectively with your wife so she knows what work is going to look like and what your schedule is like, because you don't want to put a bunch of unnecessary and undue stress and burden on her or the relationship. You can make sure that you carve out a little time for your own well-being. So that's physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual well-being. It's crucial that you do that. And that doesn't need to be, you know, an hours and hours a day. But if you can get up and you can get a 20-minute workout in somewhere in there, and you could read, 4 or 5 pages of a good book. You could do a little meditation or prayer or even scripture study, or even on your way to class or to work, you could pull up a devotional app to hit that spiritual element. I started using an app that's been very helpful for me. Where is it? I think it's just called the Bible app, and it has a daily devotional on it that's really good, and it's very
Hmm.
short, and I can just listen to it. They have plans in there, like I'll just pull it up. Um, let's see, different plans. So like here's some topics of plans: love, anxiety, healing, anger, hope, depression, fear, peace, patience, stress, loss, jealousy, temptation. So if I were just to click on the temptation, uh, there's a bunch of different plans. Like here's one: facing the giant of addiction. So if I were to click on that one, it's going to give me. Let me start this plan. So it gives me seven. It's actually, this one is a 30-day plan. And what it does is it does one devotional. So that's just a topic, like a quick message. And then it gives me a scripture that goes with it. And so I can listen to that one every day for 30 days. And that's that plan. So there's like cool stuff in there that you could listen to on the way to work or school. And then the emotional side is, for me, is just experiencing your emotions. That could be journaling, coming to terms with what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, even doing deeper work about why you're feeling that way. Maybe there's therapy in there that you could go to, or a band of brothers that you could talk with. So, hitting those four: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, are things that you can do that I think will keep you sane and actually make you more productive in your busy schedule.
Yeah. I like what you said with there's seasons,
Yeah.
and it's here's the thing, you will burn out if it stays that way. But for me, I think of when I started my business, I started out saying, okay, I'm going to get 5 years of my everything. And then 5 years turned into, all right, well, I'm going to give at least 10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
then 10 years turned into, well, I'm just going to always do it this way. And so, but what happened is instead of just that grind, I just built my work ethic where I was always doing something, but I learned how to spread it out, and I learned how to balance. I learned how to plan things in and
And
hit all the
delegate.
quadrants, delegate, hit all the quadrants. One of the things that I did think of is that when you are in that season, though, just make sure that you don't burn out the family by forgetting to do some fundamental things like date nights. Make sure you continue to schedule that, especially with a new kid and especially with your first one. It's real easy to forget to do that and to spend that time just together with you and your spouse. So make sure you're still planning those in, putting those into your schedule ahead of time, fitting those in for just you and your wife, getting a babysitter. See a lot of new parents kind of mess that up, and then they get more friction in their relationship, and that makes everything harder. So just make sure you continue that, and then embrace it, and instead of thinking of it as a grind, it's just a means to an end. And there's nobody you're going to meet that's successful in anything that they do that hasn't had to go through it, not just what you're going through, but possibly even worse or harder or more hours. And so I think what you said, and not just devotionals, but also paying attention, if you want to help reinforce the path that you're on, start listening to good podcasts of successful people. Whether it's guys like Andy Frisella, Ed Milet, we can go on and on just talking about different ones you can listen to. But I like Andy and I like Ed and I like some of those guys because they talk a lot about their past, of their stories, about that quote unquote grind,
Mm-hmm.
and the challenges they went through. And their guests that they have on talk about the same thing. You start to understand that's a common denominator. And instead of treating it like this is hard, you start treating it like this is necessary and this is awesome.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, that 4 years, that 5 years, or whatever that time you gave yourself to get through that has happened. And you're a new man. It's not as much of a grind. It doesn't even seem hard. Maybe you've built new habits, and you've grown into that new person. And then the next season has its chance to be, everything you thought it was going to be.
Yep. Agreed. Cool. What's next?
William Caleb Hare, he says, any advice for soon to be father and how to be there for my wife in those first months while also working and doing school?
I think go back. I don't think I'll answer this one, and I'll tell you why. We actually covered this
Was it
on
last
last week's
week?
podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
was
you did.
basically the same exact question. So go back and listen to that one because Kip and I talk in depth on that. And I thought we did a pretty decent job covering that topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good.
And that was
Next
from last week. So that would have been what, the 13th? No, let's see. Today's Monday, so 21st. So that would have been the 14th. Yeah. The AMA for the 14th.
next one, Jose Benavidez. Gentlemen, new listener here, love the podcast. I'm 27 years old, and my wife and I have just had our first son 3 months ago. I work full time and will be resuming an engineering degree in the winter. I not only worry about all my responsibilities making me feel like a bad father whenever I'll have to choose work or school over my family, although I strive to make them a priority, just as I've been since he was born, but also improving my sense of conviction and belief in myself because I've struggled with the opinions of others and general mental fragility in the past so that I can be a good role model to my son. Stay well and best to you and yours.
I don't, so this is a constant thing. And this is something I've experienced and I continue to experience. I'm sure, Sean, you have as well. Is this pull between family life and being there and present, available for the family, and being at work. And what's hard is that I don't think generally women always see us doing work as something for the family. I don't quite understand why that is. I'm obviously not a woman, so it's hard for me to understand, but they sometimes seem to have a hard time connecting the dots between us going to work and us doing that for the family. And I think that's especially true for men who enjoy their work.
Hmm.
Like, if, for example, I really enjoy what I'm doing, then am I doing it for my family or am I doing it for myself because I like doing it? And I think women really struggle with that. It's like, well, he's not doing it for the family. He's doing it because he loves it. Well, both can exist. I am doing it for the family. And also, I really am in a fortunate position that I can do something I love. And I've created this. But women have a hard time with that. So that takes a lot of understanding about where she's coming from, and being empathetic to that. So I don't think that most guys would choose work over their family. And I think most of us believe that when we do work, we are working for our family. So the best thing that you can do is have lots of conversations, I think, with your spouse about what you're doing, why you're doing it, what your expectations are, trying to ask her what her expectations are, and then trying to meet those expectations. Because if she's thinking to herself, well, Ryan, you make good money, and but I don't like you traveling. Okay, well, do I need to travel for my work? I could convince myself in my line of work that the answer is yes. But the answer is not really yes. It's no, I don't need to travel. We're doing this virtual podcast here. I don't have to do events somewhere else. I don't have to take speaking engagements. There isn't that necessity to do that for income. I can do events here on our property. So there's a lot of things that I can do without having to leave. But I wouldn't know that if I can't sit down and have those conversations with my wife. And that's hard because, again, I'm just speaking from my personal experience. I know that when I go to work, I feel like I'm doing this for my family. I genuinely feel like I'm working to provide for my family, to show my sons and daughter how hard I can work, what opportunities will present themselves if you're going out and doing hard work and something you love. But she may not always see it like that, your wife, that is. And so it's your job to make sure that you get on the same page as best you can and work through the issues that inevitably will come up.
It's funny because I wrote down communication, and
Mm-hmm.
then that's exactly what you talked about. It's That's so crucial. And that doesn't change, by the way. Like right now, I think what you said is important to do that with your spouse. But then as your kids grow up, in explaining to them what's happening at work, what's happening in your job, what's happening in your business, whatever it is, so that if you're not at everything, they know why. And they also can expect it. It's worse when you have fathers that are like, oh, I'm going to try and make it there, Jimmy. I'm going to try and get off work early. I'm going to try, instead of just being like, you know what, most likely I'm not going to be there, but I promise you, you have this important game coming up. I'm going to be at that one. And you schedule in that non-negotiable, and then you don't miss that one. You don't
Yeah,
have to
you
be
have
at
to be
everything.
there.
Yeah, but you don't have to be at every single thing. And as long as that's being communicated, you'd be amazed at how on board your kids are going to be with that. And the same with your spouse, just that communication. And then, like you said, maybe you don't have to travel, but maybe there's a great opportunity. And you'd sit down with church and you're like, hey, look, I have this opportunity to go here. To do it. It's going to mean I'm going to be gone for 3 days. What do we have coming up during that time? What's that going to look like for you? Is that going to be okay? Is that going to be too much? Do you need me around? And you have that conversation way ahead of time before you book it. And then if everything sounds cool, then you go ahead and you do it. But now they can't be upset about it because you had the conversation and you were on the same page and they were on board. And then the only other thought I had was that you have to be an example to your kids of what it takes to be successful. They need to see you working hard. They need to know that there's sacrifices that are given. They need to know that your world does not revolve around just them. I think it's important they understand that. I think if they feel like you drop everything all the time, no matter what, for every little thing that they need, then when they really need something, the important things maybe get missed or they don't value them as much. And then they definitely may not value what it takes to win. And then that example that like they don't know that it's hard work and that it takes sacrifice, and they've never seen that in you. And I think of my mom, and you were in a similar situation. Like my mom raised 3 kids on her own most of the time, and she always worked 2 and 3 jobs at a time. Now, we never had like the nicest clothes and all the stuff. Like I never got all the things I wanted as a kid, but we always had food. We always had, every now and then there was WIC was involved and things like that. And we were in that situation, but we never went hungry. And we always had a nice place to live, nicer than like back then. Like looking back, I didn't think so, but now I know so many people who have it worse. I'm like, man, my mom did that by herself with 3 kids. Like I know with my wife and with 4 kids, how hard that is.
Yeah.
And that's amazing to me. And I think back like, man, watching her and watching that sacrifice when I was younger, maybe I thought, man, why didn't she around? Why didn't she at any of my games? Why didn't she miss, like I hit a grand slam in high school. I remember there's no one there, no mom, no dad, no anybody. My girlfriend was there. But that was it. I remember like feeling sad about that as a kid. I look back at that now and it makes me proud of my mom, and so it goes from that selfish feeling as a kid to now I understand why, and it made me better.
Yeah.
So it's something to
100%.
think
You
about
just
as we're
got to make
raising
sure
kids.
you connect the dots though, because kids, like you said, even in high school, kids don't always connect the dots. So you have to explain to them why you're gone, what you're doing, why it's important, the sacrifice, the hard work, what you're sacrificing, why it's worth it, all that kind of stuff. Because if you just
Yeah.
assume they'll know, they probably won't.
And my mom did it. She didn't do it well, but I do remember her having breakdowns where she was not at something or whatever else, or I was sad about something, and she literally broke down and cried, and kind of apologized, but then told me what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like, I remember a couple of those moments. It wasn't the best way to communicate, and I don't know if her intention was to help me understand or what it was, or if she was even just feeling sorry for herself, but either way it was communicated and it helped me to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we're
Cool.
proactive, I think that's a better approach.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Breakdowns.
What's next?
Next is Steve Maltese. I'd like to start some sort of martial arts but suffer from a form of vertigo. It isn't always present, but a simple front roll makes me dizzy. What martial art would you recommend or not recommend? Interesting.
I don't know.
Judo for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All
I
throws all the
I
time.
don't I don't know. I mean, jujitsu might be hard because you're constantly up and down and around and spinning. I don't know your medical condition. So I think if I were you, again, I don't know the severity of your medical condition, what makes it better, what makes it worse, what exacerbates the problem. if there's a solution, if it's medication, I mean, I know vertigo is basically if I understand correctly, some sort of like imbalance, and that might be something going on with your ears or something. I don't know. I don't exactly know, but um, yes, I don't know. I would just experiment to the degree that you're able to physically. Again, I don't know the severity of what you're dealing with. Just experiment and see how it goes. You know, maybe it's jujitsu but you can't do a certain thing. Okay. Well, just tell your training partner you can't do that thing. That's what's cool about jujitsu. Most martial arts are probably like that. Like when as I've tried to recover with my pectoral tear, I'll train and then I'll just tell the guys, hey, I can't do this, or hey, take it easy on my left arm. Or if I get in a compromising situation, I just tap and I'm like, hey, stop or switch. Like I'll even give somebody the same position on I'm like, hey, instead of doing it on this side, just switch, do it on this side. So they get in that position and then we reset and go. But you know, maybe it's boxing, maybe it's kickboxing, maybe it's Muay Thai. I don't know. You're standing up more in those sports. That might be harder. You're getting your bell rung because they're striking. So that might make it worse. I don't know. Just a lot of the questions we just don't know the answer to. And so the best thing you can do is just experiment and play around with it and then find one that works for you. That's it. And adapt where you need to.
That was my thought. My thought was, I don't think you're going to find one that isn't going to give you an issue. And
Right.
so you're going to
It's
have
the
to try
nature of
different
martial
ones.
arts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Just try
that
it.
goes for everybody. You can sit and make excuses of why you're not doing it, or you can just start and then deal with that's your issue.
There's a lot of gyms that are multidisciplinary as well. So
Yeah.
you might go
Especially
to
now.
yeah, because of the MMA, but you might go to a gym that offers jujitsu and Muay Thai and boxing and wrestling and cool. That's great because then you can try it all and see what works. Or maybe they're working, you know, some sort of move on one night. And you're like, well, I can't do that. So on Wednesday night, I do kickboxing. And on Thursday, I do jujitsu. And on Friday, I do judo, whatever, right?
I like it. Uh, Next one is Daniel Garcia. Says, new listener here on episode 30-ish. That's funny. New
At
listener, but I'm
episode 30, if you're starting from the beginning, I don't know if he's saying he's starting from the beginning and now he's on episode 30 because you have about 800 to go.
or I've
Uh,
listened to 30. That's
yeah. Or
I'm
maybe he's just listened to 30 so far. I don't know. It's
yeah,
crazy. Cool.
yeah.
We're glad you're here, brother.
But question, business topic. What are some things you wish you could tell your year one self as it relates to business and running a successful entity? I'm in the public accounting field and work with SMB, and I love hearing people's answer. I don't know what SMB is.
Neither do I. Here's what I would say. It's all about marketing. Just learn to become a good marketer. Yes, you need to know your field. You need to know accounting. You're in financial services. You need to know that. I'm in, you know, men's work. I need to know that. But at the end of the day, marketing is something that so many professionals skip. And it really doesn't matter how great of an accountant you are if you don't have anybody to talk to. It just does, it's irrelevant. You could be the best accountant in the world and nobody's talking to you, or you can't relate with people, or you can't solve people's problems, or you can't identify what their problems are in a meaningful and significant way, then nothing else matters. And so that's where so many professionals miss the mark is they forget to market. They think just being good at a thing qualifies them to have all the referrals and leads and business they want. And it just doesn't. I know of so many organizations that their product is inferior to other products out there, but they're absolutely dominating the market because they're really good at marketing and they're
Yeah.
really good. I've signed up for a couple of courses over the past couple of weeks, and one's really, really good. The content and everything they have is really rich and in depth and deep and good, but their presentation's horrible. And so it looks less valuable. And then there's another one that along the same vein where their content isn't as deep or meaningful or significant, but their marketing and their presentation is beautiful. The way they do videos and the way their funnels and leads and all this kind of stuff works. And that one's more appealing, even though I know that's an inferior product. It just looks better. So don't overlook the importance of how things look, how things are communicated, what they tell people, the ease of your products and services. Accountants can fall into this a lot. Yeah. Numbers guys, intelligent people fall into this all the time. Like, let's talk about all the ones and the zeros and the this and the that. That's not what people want. They don't want that. They want to know that they're paying as little taxes as possible. They don't need to know how it's baked. They just need to know that cake is correct. So that's a trap you could fall into, and marketing could alleviate and help a lot of that. Even my
Yeah.
accountant, they send me stuff and they're like, hey, I need an 1170S form signed. I'm like, I don't know what that is. And they're like, oh, well, it's this form that does this thing. I'm like, cool. Just send it to me and put a little sticky note on it and say, sign here. Like, why are you telling me all that? Like, that's why I hired you. I want to know the basics of what that form is, what I'm signing and what you're doing. But like, don't tell me, like, yeah, it's just weird, so just
Uh,
read the room a bit.
I'm laughing because I'm the same exact way with my accountant. He'll start explaining anything, and I'm just like, I got to stop you. Like, just send me a text and tell me how much I need to pay, where I need to send it, what to do,
Right.
and that's it.
That's
That's
it.
all I
That's
need
all
to
I
know.
need. Yep. Yep. So let that be a lesson.
Yeah, that's funny you said marketing because I wrote down talk to more people faster.
Mm,
So that in my business, I would have talked
marketing.
to more people and I would have done it sooner
Yeah.
instead of being afraid to be uncomfortable, not feeling like I presented it well enough. None of that mattered because the only way I got better was by talking to more people faster, marketing, and then I got better. So if I would have done that more and I would have done it sooner, I would have gotten better faster and more articulate. I would have gotten more results, and the compounding would have happened sooner.
Right.
And I think of it like front loading a mutual fund, which he's a numbers guy. He'll be able to appreciate this with compound interest. It works best when you front load more into it on the front end. And
Of
so
course.
the more clients you can get in a shorter amount of time on the front end, that's going to compound into your referrals and everything else long term. So,
What's interesting about that, because we were in similar businesses. When I started to become successful, my financial planning practice was when I did exactly what you said, but I did it in a different way. I started recording CDs for my first presentation. I started recording and handing out CDs. So I'd hand out CDs to people, and then the only people that would come into my office are the ones that listened to it and liked what I had to say. And so my closing ratio went way up from the first
yeah.
time I met them. So that's what you're saying. More people faster. It's like, because what I was doing before is I would sit down with somebody for an hour and try to convince them they should work with me. And my closing ratio might have been 40 or 60%. I don't even remember what it was. Instead, my closing ratio when I sat down with somebody after I gave them a CD first went up to 80 or 90% closing ratio. More people faster. And it was all just marketing.
And people are probably listening, thinking like CDs. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
why would you
Yeah,
do that?
right.
Well, back then, that's all we had. You didn't
That's
have
all I was.
the
But
internet. You
also
didn't have.
then I moved over to a podcast, and again, more people faster because I had hundreds and then thousands of people listening to me. And I had a doctor reach out. He was a pediatric physician, and he reached out and he's like, hey, I need disability insurance. I'm like, okay, do you know what you're looking for? And he had this laundry list of items that he wanted on his disability insurance. And I was like, whoa, you know a lot about disability insurance. Most people don't know anything about disability insurance. And I said, how are you been shopping around or you've been working with somebody else? Or like, how do you know this much about it? He's like, oh, I just listened to your podcast and I wrote down everything you told me I needed. Like, okay, got it. So this podcasting thing works. Right. And so I was presenting to 1,000 people at a time. And then the people who wanted to qualify themselves to work with me would come to me, and more people faster. It's marketing.
Yeah, I like it. The That's all the questions we have from Facebook, but I have one
Okay.
that I and it goes with this. He's talking first year. Let's talk about the challenges that you have with success. Most of the questions we get are the challenges you get when you start. And not many people talk about the challenges they get when they find success. And I've been, for whatever reason, talking to a lot of friends and people recently that are very successful. And we've been in more conversations of kind of like the traps or the issues or the things that come up as you gain success. And so like now you with the podcast, how many years are you now deep and with Order Man?
7.5.
Okay. So 7.5, and you're in the quote unquote successful range now. If you looked at income scope, and that's only going to improve. And so would you say that at this point you're at the where you wanted to be, thought you'd be? Are you larger scale than you hoped? Income, all those things. Are you quote unquote there or not quite? Um, and I'm talking from where you started because it's probably different now in your
Yeah.
thought in that than when you started. And then now that you are in this success range, what are some of the major things that you didn't think of? Or is there anything different now than you thought it would be? What are some thoughts on that?
Yeah.
That
I
I
mean,
think
the,
it's
the
important
biggest
for.
thing for me right now is learning to delegate more effectively so that I can have the time that I want with my family and to do the other things that are important to me, but still keep the organization running. So that delegation is important. It's part of the reason you're here. It's part of the reason Kip co-hosts. And when I can't make it, you guys do a wonderful job. I used to believe I had to do it all. I don't have to do it all. I have to do a lot of it and I have to make sure it gets done, but I don't have to do it all. In fact, you guys bring a dynamic I couldn't bring myself. So that's a value add to the people who would listen, right? Whether it's that or having help for the events or the way that we run the organization for the Iron Council or Exclusive Brotherhood. Just learning that there's other people that can fit into the puzzle that you should be working with and implementing. So there's that. Um, and then just making sure that we're still growing, that we're still evolving. Because one thing I've noticed is there's a lot of other organizations that have basically mimicked what we have. And so that's fine. I have no problem with that. There's plenty to go around, but we need to be cutting edge. We need to get out ahead of what they're doing. And we need to think outside of the box and create something that somebody can't just get somewhere else. So I'm constantly thinking about new ways to innovate and evolve and do things that other people aren't doing. I think those are the two biggest things for me is delegation, making sure to let some of it go was still the growth mindset, and then uh, having the ability to innovate and evolve as we go. Those are the biggest things for me.
Hmm, interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, there's not much talk about it. I think everybody just assumes that it's like, I put in this work. We talked about seasons,
Yeah.
and I thought about it during that question because there's, I think most people start to understand that, but then they think, okay, when this season is over and my, 5 years or 6 years or 7 years or 10 or whatever it is up, and I'm going to ride into the sunset and everything's going to be magical and it's going to be easy and,
Mm-hmm.
everything else. And I don't think necessarily we know and understand or think that there's still going to be a push. There's still going to be challenges. There's still going to be issues and things and changes. And, obviously the marketplace isn't the same today as it was 7 years ago
Right.
for what you're doing. And
Right.
so you need to evolve and continue shifting your perspective, but then also you're going to grow and change, and dynamics in your life are going to change, and it's just something to be prepared for, I think, and aware of.
Right.
That the growth part, I think, never changes.
Yeah. It
um
shouldn't. You should always grow. I mean, you should always look for ways to grow because you'll just atrophy if you don't, and you don't want that to happen. Clearly, obviously.
yeah.
Cool, man. Well,
All
awesome. So
right,
we got all the questions on Facebook.
that's it. That's every
All
single one
right.
of them.
Well, guys, I appreciate the questions. Great questions today. We'll make sure we get this out. This is Wednesday. We'll be back on Friday for our Friday field notes. But also remember, as we close things out today, we've got the Iron Council that's going to be open for about a week now. A little, yeah, about exactly a week, and then we shut it down for the rest of the year. We won't be opening up again until the end of this year for next year. So if you thought about having some accountability, like we talked about earlier, a band of brothers, guys in your corner, guys that you can communicate with and learn from, and join different channels like the faith channel we talked about, or sobriety channel, or entrepreneurship channel, or firearms or fatherhood channel, all of the things that we talked about today, you can find those channels in the Iron Council. So go check it out at orderaman.com/Iron Council. Anything else, Sean, from you?
Is the main event sold out? Is that
Been sold out for a
done?
year. Yeah.
A year? Oh, that's
Yeah.
so
It's been sold
crazy.
out for a year. In fact, we have people on the waiting list, and I don't know how long that waiting list is, but we'll let you guys know when the next one is.
That's awesome. And then what about your moose hunt? When's
That's
that
coming
coming
up
up?
too. I finish up the main event and I leave that afternoon for the moose hunt.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it'll be
All right.
crazy. Yeah.
Very cool.
All right, you
Well,
guys. We'll be back next week, or actually Friday. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.